Thanks for coming on the Vantage Point Podcast. First of all, how are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no worries. Let's start from the beginning then. What was it that got you into powerlifting? How did that start? What got you into lifting first, and then from there, what made you specify into powerlifting? Tell me about it.
So I had never really set foot in a gym prior to coming to uni. And it was actually uni that got me into powerlifting. So yeah, came along in my first year, went to Freshers Fair, signed up for near enough everything in Freshers Fair, and just kind of went along to a taster session on a whim, thinking I would never really carry on with it. Anyway, I went along, absolutely loved it, and I have not looked back since. I just had the best time, met the best people, and yeah, it just kind of went from there, really.
It seems like it's a good community, the powerlifting community. Everyone's got each other's back and stuff. What was
Yeah.
it about powerlifting specifically over, the other styles of strength training there are, over bodybuilding, over weightlifting, like Olympic style lifting? Why powerlifting of those?
I've always been a very sporty person, but when I was I think I was 11 or 12 years old, I developed asthma just completely randomly. And all of those sports that I was doing at the time ended up just stopping completely. And I think that
Hmm.
with powerlifting, kind of, I can still feel really strong and still be super healthy and have training that helps me with my mental health as well as my physical health without doing stupid amount of cardio and stuff like that. So I just feel like with something like weightlifting, I have mad respect for weightlifters because I genuinely don't think I could do it. It's just so technical, and I feel like a lot of the training style that they have is very kind of cardio based in a way, just with like the kind of higher rep ranges, and that same sort of thing applies to bodybuilding. And I think that's why I kind of prefer powerlifting because it takes elements of both, but it's easier in a way.
I get you.
But
I get you. Well,
that
I
makes
suppose
sense.
easy's to belittle it a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's not easy, but yeah. Obviously it's a really sick community, and it seems like you've really found your home. But powerlifting to me, it always strikes me as, can it be sometimes a bit of a lonely sport because you know you've got your team around you, but realistically they're not going to be able to compete on the day with you, and it's not them putting in the hours for you. You're really doing it all on your own. Does it ever get lonely? Do you ever feel lonely doing it?
absolutely never. I genuinely feel like I found my sport, and a massive, massive part of that has been the people around me in the community, just powerlifting in general. Um, you're right, like it's a very solo sport, and even with something like books, for example, where you go in as a team, you still essentially competing just you. But yeah, I've never ever felt lonely. I love training with people, and I just love going to competitions because the amount of support that is insane. Like I don't know if you've ever been to a powerlifting competition, but even if it's not your kind of thing, 100% go because the atmosphere is just incredible. It's people supporting people, people who you don't even know. It's just everybody's in the same boat, and I just love that. So I have, even though it's a solo sport and you compete in solo, I never ever ever feel lonely ever.
I've not been to a comp day, but it always looks amazing. How would you describe a comp day? Like, what happens from the moment you arrive? Talk me through it.
At least in the federation that I compete in, which is called the IPF, you will have your weigh-in either in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on what time you compete in, 2 hours before you start. So that's always like really, really nerve-wracking because if you don't make weight, you can't compete. It's as simple as that.
Oh, of course,
So
yeah.
for me, anyway, I'm always super, super nervous in the morning. I'm really conscious of my weight. I'm conscious of what I'm eating, how I'm feeling that day, if I've slept well. But then after I've weighed in, which has always been very successful for me, I feel so much more relaxed. I'm getting ready, I'm getting hyped, I can eat food. And then obviously the day begins. I've always competed in the mornings just because I'm a lighter weight class, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. But as I say, yeah, so usually I'm in the morning, get it out of the way. I much prefer it that way.
Handy.
I think with a powerlifting comp, you'll start off, it'll go squats, bench, deadlift. So you'll do 3 lifts on each. So you'll be starting with squats, and you want to be starting with something that's a really comfortable weight that you can, I don't know, triple. So usually at the beginning, there's still like a really good atmosphere, but it's quite quiet, people are just kind of laying down the ground. You're kind of learning what your competitors are doing and what kind of jumps that they make. And then that obviously affects what kind of jumps you're going to make. But usually by the time it gets to deadlifts, and this applies for any weight class, that's when it's like super duper hyped, because it's deadlifts where it could be a make or break to getting podium or getting a world record or any record. It doesn't have to be a world record, and that's where it's kind of right, I gotta be switched on now. But as I say, it's just in general, the whole day is amazing, and it's always obviously kind of volunteers who come in and use their time to ref, to judge, to spot and load, to be there for moral support and handling and stuff like that. And it's just insane. And then sometimes they'll do like a little podium thing at the end, and everybody will get a medal, and it's just really lovely. It's really nice.
You talked to me about the nerves. How do you calm yourself and clear your mind before you take a lift? What are the steps you go through in your head to prepare yourself to lift something so tremendously heavy off the floor or on your back?
Okay, so I have a very kind of specific like regime that I do. So depending
Tell
on the
me.
lift, depends on like how I kind of set up. So for example, for deadlifts, because as I was saying before, that's like you're going all in for that one. I need to be hyped for deadlifts. So for deadlifts, I will make sure I've got like heavy or death metal screaming in my ears. That gets me psyched up, but actually calms me down as well, because it gets me in the zone. I'm blocking everyone out. I'm ready for the platform. Whereas on the flip side, for bench, for some reason, I need to be calm. It's not a matter of me hyping myself up. I feel like bench is a lot more technical. So there's a lot more I need to be thinking about. So for bench, I'll have like I can kind of get away with maybe like talking to my handler, because that in a way will help calm me down, where I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just kind of, okay, I'm about to go on the platform. Let's just keep it chill. And then for squats, I need kind of like something upbeat, because it's the start of the day. I'm still kind of waking up a bit, I'm loaded up on caffeine. But that hypes me up in its own way as well. Don't need quite as heavy music, but just kind of like, your average like indie
Middle
or
ground.
like, pop. Yeah, just whatever. So that's kind of what I do anyway. And in their own
Yeah.
little way, they get me ready, but calm me down at the same time.
Yeah, so you found that sweet spot of having the sort of energy and I suppose a bit of aggression, I'd have thought, to, find something deep within you to lift something that is a big challenge and weight, something that, I assume you're not lifting your actual 1 rep max on a day. Do you set it a little bit lower so you know that you can achieve it? Or what's the technique there? Because if you fail it, right? What do you go for? Do you go a little bit lower than you can do, or do you aim high and just hope to God that you get it on the day?
I guess it depends on what your goals are. So I think for your first attempts on all lifts, you don't want to be maxing out. You don't want to be doing your 1 rep. You want to be doing something that's very comfortable, just to get a number on the board. Because if you don't get a number, there's an expression that we use called bombing out. And essentially, if you bomb out, it means that you can't get an overall total, and therefore you can't qualify for anything further. So for your first attempt, you just want to get something on the board, something that you're comfortable with, just to get the lay of the ground. But then by the time usually you get to your third attempt, yeah, you want to be going all out. Like, you want to be maxing out, pushing yourself to the limit. But as I say, some people don't need to do that. Some people are just so exceptionally good that they don't actually need to max out. They might have an ulterior motive or an end goal that's way further in sight. So maybe they're just getting a qualifying total for now to then really push
All right.
themselves in the. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I get you. Interesting. So, not everyone there might be doing it for the same reason. What's when you're going into a comp, what's your reason for like competing? Because obviously there's the training side of it, right? You mentioned the mental health before. Why do you want to compete against other people? What do you get out of that?
Um,
Do you
I
want to be the
think
best? What is it?
I I mean, I guess everybody always wants to be the best in their sport. I guess I just enjoy doing it. And comps are just a completely different atmosphere to being training in the gym. Not that I don't get that same support in the gym, because 100% I do. Um,
Hmm.
and also you get to meet all these incredible people who are also sharing your passion. I think certainly in the beginning for me, I really struggled to just simply enjoy a competition, because all I was thinking about is, oh my gosh, I've got to hit this number, or oh my gosh, I've got to be on the podium. And it's so much more than that. And I
Hmm.
found that, not that that's a bad thing to have that goal in mind. I still have those goals, but I kind of put more that I need to enjoy myself. That should be the priority. And 9 times out of 10, I always end up doing really well when I have that as my priority, not focusing on a number. But as I say, some people actually might need to focus on a number, for example, a qualifying total, or somebody might be going for a British record or a world record. And so they will have a number in mind, and that will affect their other lifts. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh well. So do you feel like you learn something about yourself when you put yourself in that high pressure situation rather than just getting the reps done in the gym? Do you feel like you develop more and just learn more from the process of going through a comp?
Gosh. I mean, yeah, I'm a completely different person compared to who I was 3 years ago when I first started. Like, I remember my
Also,
first it was a Welsh competition in Cardiff, and at the time it was just like, well, it's just something fun. I was just doing it just because everybody else is doing it. And then it was actually after that comp that I was like, do you know what? This is something I want to do more seriously. And that's when I got my first coach and went from there. And then a few months later, I was competing at nationals. And so it was just incredible.
well,
But yeah, I guess like it just it gives you a real insight into like who you are as a person and just how much you can push yourself. But in like the best way possible, because you're doing something that you enjoy and it's a challenge that you're willing to face and that is just gonna help you grow as a person. And then like just kind of following on what we were saying before, just builds on mental and physical health, which is obviously incredibly important. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, you wouldn't be where you are, with it without that kind of mental drive to achieve it, and you can't maintain that, without something in the background, something you're working on that pushes you a bit further than you'd be comfortable with normally, right? Do you feel like building strength and pushing yourself to the limit in a comp? Do you think those things translate to other areas of your life? Do you notice things that are different about yourself, just on the day to day? Maybe your willingness to come on a podcast, perhaps, stuff like this that you might not have had confidence to do before you found confidence through strength training and lifting really heavy.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Like, I've never really thought about it, to be honest, until you've kind of mentioned it today. But um, like I I'm not anymore, but I used to be the club captain of the powerlifting club in Bangor Uni. And I don't know if that's something I ever would have done before, but just because I completely fell in love with the sport and I simply just wanted to share that passion with other people with the hope that they would also fall in love with powerlifting. I do genuinely believe that that has happened. And that's just amazing. And that's why I loved kind of doing that role as a powerlifting captain. And I only stopped because I was in my final year of uni and I thought, okay, I need to put uni first now. This is important. But yeah, like it really does. Like, yeah.
Every sport has its share of background noise and behind the scenes kind of politics that interferes with just the pure competitive aspect of the sport. For example, in MMA, you get the weight cutting type stuff, drug cheats, that sort of thing. And then, the boxing, you get different promoters not wanting to work together and things like that. And then, even in terms of like the football, you've got smaller leagues struggling to get people to come to the games. What are the issues you see in powerlifting that could potentially be a negative on the sport? And what do you think could be improved in powerlifting?
Wow. Okay. There's so many things. So yeah, I mean, as you say, just like any other sports, at least in the federation that I compete in, it's a drug tested federation, so you're not allowed to take drugs, essentially.
That's good.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it does still happen. Even though there are other federations where it is allowed, people do decide to still do it, and they do get caught at the end of the day. And I think, again, just with like the IPF federation, I'm not too sure what it's like in other federations, but at least in my opinion, I feel like maybe there needs to be a kind of refresher on the kind of people who are running it. I feel like as a community, we've grown a lot more since kind of the past 10 to 20 years ago, and times are changing, and
Definitely.
we need to match with that. We need to support current lifters, not just world-class lifters. And I do feel like a lot of people kind of get left behind because of that reason, which is really unfortunate. What is great that I have noticed is that there are a lot more women taking part in not just powerlifting, but other strength sports too, like weightlifting. And that is just incredible. Yeah. And I think, like, certainly within the communities that I kind of follow on Instagram, they're really pushing for that kind of thing and really supporting women in powerlifting and women in sport in general, which is just insane. In terms of like what I would change as well, like one of the reasons why powerlifting isn't in the Olympics, for example, is simply because there are so many different federations and each federation has different rules. And it would just be amazing if, one day I could have my goal could compete in the Olympics. And unfortunately, I simply can't have it as a goal because it's unrealistic, because we're not in the Olympics, I've thankfully managed to touch near enough at that level with the Commonwealth, but the Olympics is a whole other level. And I think, it would just be great if, somewhere down the line, there could be some sort of structured rule with the same principles, the same rules, the same just style of like lifting and equipment and hit and everything like that, so that everybody has an opportunity to get to that level, and it's fair practice and it's just ethical, and but that's kind of a big I think it's going to take a long time before that actually happens, unfortunately, but we'll see.
Well, yeah, I hope that does happen, because I didn't realize you weren't even close to being able to get in the Olympics. I thought that would be next up. Skateboarding's in the Olympics. I'd have thought powerlifting would have, if anything, gone in before. But that's interesting. You say about the different federations. I think you worded it, who each have different regulations on the competitions, and it reminds me of when. Do you remember when Thor did the deadlift? It was 501. And it was all in lockdown, so it wasn't officiated the same way you would normally officiate like a deadlift record. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think he is the record holder then, or do you think it's still Eddie Hall?
Gosh, you're gonna put me on the spot there. Okay.
What did your gut say?
Oh,
Because he did have officials with him, or people who were official with him at least, but it just wasn't run the same way as you'd normally run a comp. And I think his dad was the one who loaded the plates for him. So, that's got to be an advantage, right?
Yeah.
Or at least it could be.
The likes of someone like Thor, he's obviously incredibly strong. And I reckon he could pull that weight again. So
I think so, yeah.
I think that he should do it as Eddie Hall did it. And I think then he can claim it twice then, because he's like, okay, well, I've done it during lockdown and I've done it the same way that Eddie Hall did it too. I just think that I never really had an opinion on it just because of all the massive backlash and negativity that the two of them had with each other. Seems like now that's kind of in the past, but at the time it infuriated me. It's so just there's just no
Seemed kind of
sports.
petty, didn't it?
It just really was in because before that happened, I loved watching them both. I thought they both had really good qualities, and I enjoyed watching them lifting and just doing all those stupid YouTube videos, especially Eddie Hall. But I think that they were just being childish, and whatever. But yeah, I think that especially now that things have settled in terms of COVID, you should just do it again. Just make a point, prove a point that he can do it again.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, but Thor's both of them, I think, have lost a ton of weight since they did that. So I think for Thor to get back up to that weight, I don't know if he even could do that anymore. I mean, maybe, but I think both of them, they stopped doing super heavy lifting because they were getting so big. It was almost like a health detriment to them to be that big. Talk to me about how COVID and the lockdowns affected, your side of powerlifting. Did it affect competitions? I assume things must have been cancelled and stuff, right? How did you go about getting around that? Just keep training or what?
I mean, yeah, so competitions were cancelled or they were limited to, I don't know, like less than 10 spectators when we had that kind of rule with it was like 30 people indoors or something like that, which was just, I was saying before about the atmosphere, it just wasn't there anymore.
No atmosphere
yeah. It was just a bit like, oh well, this is boring. But yeah, I did struggle to continue training, but I dug into some savings, bought a lot of home gym equipment. Wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. And now I have it all stored back home, and I never use it.
Same.
I think just like I remember everything being sold out on like all these different sports sites or like Amazon or stuff like that, and I just got really lucky, to be honest, to get something in. But that was hard for everyone, like not just people who kind of are into the gym, but yeah, it definitely had an impact on my training. Because I wasn't consistent. I had no motivation to train. There was just so many other things that I was kind of thinking about, and yeah, I guess it's kind of why I say like, oh, I've been training for around 3 years, because technically I had a really big chunk where I didn't train at all, or at least not consistently.
Wow.
Kind of positively impact my training. So yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, when lockdown started, I'm not going to say I was powerlifting, but I was lifting the heaviest weights I'd been lifting at that point, and I was as fat as I'd ever been, but I was as strong as I'd ever been as well. And I was thinking, I wonder what the limit of this is, And every week I was coming in getting new PBs, and it was feeling easy because I'd been, intentionally eating more and bulking up. And I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I will start powerlifting. And then lockdown happened. I was like, damn, suddenly I've got no weight. I can't train to the level I was training. I've got all this weight on. So I started running every day, and I started getting shin splints. I used to be able to run like no problem. And now I can again, thankfully. But it just shocked me how I'd let my cardio go, and just my body just wasn't able to deal with this new amount of weight I had on. Do you ever find that when, if you trying to increase your mass for a comp, or do you know of people who've tried to put weight on like that, and then it's led to other health issues? I mean, you hear about Eddie Hall talking about the health issues he faced by bulking up to lift heavy weight. Do you get that, or does that not happen much?
I don't know if I've ever heard of anybody, at least not in powerlifting, as you say, in
Mm,
strongman, because their weight is way more than even
crazy.
heavy
Yeah.
powerlifting. Yeah. Um, but I can certainly like relate to some level. I mean, I don't run, but I'm definitely like upping my cardio more. And I think because I my like what we call walking weight, which is like the weight that you just kind of normally sat at post or pre-comp,
Yeah.
is quite a few kilos above what I actually compete in. And so I kind of find that, especially in that kind of initial bulk phase, you do kind of feel a bit like groggy and you don't want to do cardio, and walking up a hill is really difficult. Um, but yeah, I think thankfully I haven't heard of anyone who's had any health conditions or developed anything dangerous because of that. But would agree 100% with the strongman. Like that's a different ball game.
Yeah. Yeah. Just bring it back to the weight cutting. We touched on it briefly earlier. Do you ever find there's the same issues in powerlifting as you get in combat sports, for example, where people go into comps trying to drain so much weight so that they can get in a smaller weight class and excel in that smaller weight class, um, that it ends up having a negative impact on them. Like they're super dehydrated, they struggle to lift the weight they could comfortably lift before, all to get in that smaller weight category. Do you see that happen much, or is that not as big of a problem in powerlifting?
100% see that in powerlifting.
Oh, really?
Especially
Right.
especially at kind of a more elite level. Um, you see, people are buying portable saunas. They're water
Yeah,
cutting.
sweatsuits and stuff.
Yeah, sweatsuits. Like they're doing everything, and it's usually in quite a short period of time, not like a gradual process. And as you say, it's literally just to get into that class below so that they can actually be at the top. Um, yeah, it's some of the stuff is insane. And as you say, sometimes it's okay and they still compete really well. But I'd say most of the time, especially if you're not super experienced in it, it's gonna have a negative effect. And it'll totally depend on the day. But as I say, it's usually those who are experienced with it, who have done it for a long time. They know what they're doing. They're somewhat safe doing it. They know how their body's going to respond to whatever kind of cutting style that they're doing. But yeah, I hear of some wild stories. I've done some cuts before, but nowhere near as drastic as that. Nor would I want to. I just feel like it would put me off the sport completely. Because weight and kind of linking in with body image is like a huge thing, especially with strength sports. So I'm not ready for that. I'm not mentally prepared enough for that kind of thing. I'm happy just kind of doing my own little cuts alongside with my coach's support. Um, but yeah, as I say, top of top level of powerlifting, definitely some kind of crazy, crazy stuff going on.
Yeah, that's interesting that it bleeds into other sports as well. You hear about the impact it has on fighters. Like when they're so dehydrated to meet a weight class, and then they bulk up again the next day, rehydrate themselves well over the limit, and either they're beating up a guy who's then much smaller than them, or they're still so dehydrated that they get one hit to the temple and their brain rocks inside their head because there's no cushioning, there's no
Oh,
hydration. And yeah, that's a real issue there. Let's talk about some positives of powerlifting. I want to know what's the best style of deadlift, and help me settle a debate. Which is better, sumo or conventional, and why?
oh
And is sumo
gosh.
even a real deadlift?
Okay.
Come on, break it down.
I'm really mixed about this one because I started pulling conventional. I then competed and pulled sumo for a really long time and then have very recently gone back to conventional. So I'd
Okay,
say
why?
mainly because I'd kind of hit a plateau on sumo. And I'd started with a new coach, and after speaking with my coach and the kind of team that my coach is based with, we'd agreed that I was going to have like a couple of blocks doing conventional and just see how I got on. And now
Mm.
I have surpassed the weight that I pulled with sumo. So
Oh
I
well.
think I'm a lot shorter, so there is always going to be less ROM anyway. But there's pros and cons for both. I think sumo, it is just a gooder lift as conventional. I think some people do absolutely push it to the limit of within the rules, but they're allowed to because there's nothing saying they can't.
Do you think
Although
there
saying,
should be?
well, yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, in the IPF, they've just created a rule with bench depth, which I haven't
Oh
yet
really?
new rule, but obviously there's been quite a few competitions so far with this new rule, and it is something that I'm concerned about because I am not hitting this bench depth. I'm not saying I had a kind of stupid, barely bending my elbows ROM, but I definitely had a lot of a shorter ROM than other people. But that's just because my arms are short, and it was great because bench was my best lift because of it. And now it's like, okay, I'm having to make some big changes here, but it's not taken me that long to get my bench back up to strength. I think thankfully it was only bench and not like changes to all three, because I think that would have had a massive impact on kind of my total and where I would place in a competition. So I don't really know about sumo if there should be kind of a rule implemented. I feel like they should let's just see how bench gets on first. But I wouldn't be surprised if down the line there was something like, I don't know, you can't put your feet past the ring or something silly
Mm.
like that.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons for both, and I think you should be allowed to pull whichever best suits your body type. Like, it's as simple as I say. Like, I'm a short lifter, so whichever lift I do, the ROM is going to be very minimal. But for someone who has really long arms, they're going to pull sumo because it just makes sense. On most lifters
Mm.
who have long arms are going to pull sumo, but even if they pull conventional, the ROM is still shorter. But yeah, it really, really does depend. Because it's essentially the same as all three of the lifts. Like, a lot of people have a different squat stance just simply based on their body.
Yeah, all sorts can affect it, can't it? Your joint mobility, hip mobility. You might be really strong but have rubbish ankles, and that
Yeah.
might affect which one you're able to do. Say you were the person that you spoke to at the uni halls when you first went there, and they convinced you to start powerlifting. How would you talk to a new person if you were talking to yourself walking in that room?
When I was in the uni fair, the thing that made me sign up, even though, as I say, I did kind of just sign up for everything, but the thing that made me remember powerlifting was one of the committee members at the time. He'd stepped in front of me and he was like, "Do you want to get fit without doing cardio?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I do." And I think, like, even though there is quite a comedic element to that, like, it's important. Not everybody can do cardio. Not everybody's got the lung capacity to run miles and miles. And I am one of those people simply from a condition that I can't help. And yeah, I think it would, maybe play on that kind of thing, but I definitely push more of the getting fit through strength, through weight training. I just think it's so beneficial to anyone, really, like, not just powerlifters or weightlifters, but it just supports so many other sports. Like, I know that the rugby teams at uni use Brailsford and the gym equipment in Brailsford. There's specifically the Olympic room that they've got, platform 81, just to train as an accessory to their training. And I just think, yes, that's so important. And I think that's why things like powerlifting and weightlifting are really important, not just for those who are competing in those sports, but as I say, because it just has such a benefit for other sports. And so I think I'd kind of take that kind of route. However, as I say, that like day for me and this guy, it was really, really funny. And it's true, you know, it's true.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well there, especially on the point where you said about how well it translates to other sports. In my experience, like lifting heavy gives me all sorts of other advantages when it comes to anything else I'm doing, whether it's carrying shopping bags in or whether it's trying a totally different sport. It's just I have an inherent advantage from doing heavy lifting in the gym. Now, Hannah, that's all we've got time for today. I think that's a really good note to end on, to be honest. Yeah, go and do some powerlifting, start up with a powerlifting club, get involved. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Hannah. Cheers.
Thank you so much for having me.